Good evening and welcome to the world of illusions. In the next 30 minutes, we'll have a trick or two up our sleeves as we connect illusion with science. New scientific ideas that rely on illusions and some illusions that rely on science. Your magic. And there's more to this show than meets the eye.
To make his act so convincing, the good magician relies on sleight of hand and false clues to distract his audience. And it's not only magicians who are so fascinated by the way that the brain tries to make sense of specific clues. So are psychologists who have devised perception tests like these. Now, those random splodges rapidly take on a more familiar shape. And you may already have seen this well-known portrait. It is, of course, of two ladies. Most people spot the old lady first, but look again, because looking over her shoulder is her granddaughter. Now, when it's up to our brains to decide what we see, as in this case, you have the basis for a psychological test, and we'll be looking at some new ones later on. Artists have often used their skills to baffle us. Escher's watercourse runs so convincingly uphill. What about his three intersecting worlds? Each one of those three ladies is standing in her own plane with its own gravity. But watch the balls. They may be bouncing down one staircase, but they're certainly bouncing up the next. And today, image makers can have an absolute field day. They can call on a whole range of technology to really stretch our imagination.
One way is for artists to use elaborate film animation to bring their ideas to life. But these days, you don't even need to be able to draw. Because computers offer an endless source of inspiration. Computer graphics can take us on impossible journeys. But let's begin tonight by entering the world of scientific illusion that for most of us still seems like magic.
The wonder of holograms is their ability to create, out of thin air, apparently solid objects. But holograms can be more than just pretty pictures. They're a very elegant way of storing a great deal of information, which is why holograms are attracting a lot of fresh interest from computer designers. See, although we're used to seeing a single image on a hologram plate, there doesn't have to be just one. On this plate, for instance, there's lines of text, let's hear it for Loughborough, then a page of drawing, followed by a coded pattern of dots. That's a mechanical stress pattern, and finally that, I'm assured, is a valve lit by a fibre optic probe. But the really interesting thing about this is that if I reduce the area through which you can see any of these images, the image still exists, seemingly large as life. And that's because every square millimetre along that strip contains that individual image, complete. Now, that facility to cram information into a small space is why computer designers are so interested, because, of course, that's exactly what a computer memory does, even if it deals in digits and not pictures. But to become properly useful as a computer memory, you'd have to be able to erase that memory so you could record new information in its place. And you can't really do that with a conventional hologram plate. Those images are there for life. But you can do it with a piece of light-sensitive plastic like this. That's a hologram of a tangerine there. Let's assume you want to get rid of it. And to do that, you momentarily melt the plastic by passing a small electric current across it. It's gone. Okay, all set now to record a new image. It's a mince pie. Douse the lights while we sensitize the plate. Quick flash of laser light. The plate is developed automatically. Now we should be there. And just to prove that that really is a hologram, I shall now eat the real mince pie and leave you to look at the hologram.
This is called the impossible triangle, Until recently, it's only appeared as a baffling two-dimensional drawing, but it is now a solid object. The apparently flat sides are in fact carefully calculated curves, and only the mathematical power of a computer linked to a cutting tool was able to achieve the shape. Fooling the eye with optical tricks is fascinating, but it can also be useful, particularly for testing vision and perception. Can you recognise anything in that picture? Well, if you can't, you might when I've altered it a little. Now you should clearly see a face. All I did was vary the brightness of the red relative to the green. In the original setting, the red and green were actually the same brightness. And it turns out that with patches of just colour information, it's difficult for the brain to interpret a scene. It needs brightness as well to work it out. And that phenomenon is the basis of two new eye tests from Bristol University, now possible using the graphics capabilities of a microcomputer. The first is a far more precise colour test than these traditional cards, where you have to try and pick out a number, like that 7 from the background. And it's more precise because it gives more than a straight pass or fail. Now, to understand it, look at this red letter E on a yellow background. Now, the aim of the test is to adjust the brightness of the red to find the point where it's exactly the same brightness as the yellow. But that's very, very difficult to do, simply because they are different colours. The way round it is to alternate the two colours, but do be careful when you're watching this if you're sensitive to flashing lights. I'm going to, first of all, alternate it at quite a slow speed, but as the speed gathers, when it is flashing at about 25 times a second, the two colours merge. You're no longer aware of two different colours, although they are still there, and you can prove that by either blinking at the screen or doing this while you watch. But you can still see flickering, and that's due to a difference in brightness between those two colours. So by altering the brightness of the red, when the E seems to stop flickering, it must mean it's the same brightness as the yellow. Right. I think we've got to go slightly down the scale there. It's just about to stop for me on 167. So that reading is an accurate measurement of my sensitivity to red, but it's probably different for your eyes and for your television set at home. So I'll go up the scale a little, and then I'll go down it, and somewhere between those readings it should have stopped flickering for you, so that you can see the principle of the test. And you can do exactly the same for green colour blindness. And with this kind of accuracy, it means that it's extremely useful for early diagnosis of diseases that affect colour vision, like diabetes. The second test, using computer graphics, goes deeper than any conventional eye test. It tests perception. Take a scene like this, for example. How does the brain instantly perceive what's here? Because most objects are already familiar, you don't need to see a whole object to work out what it is. Your subconscious fills in the rest, because it is very unlikely that the other half doesn't exist. Except, perhaps, on tomorrow's world. The key word is symmetry. There are hardly any objects that aren't symmetrical in one way or another. So the brain can make shortcuts to identify them. A test to measure that perception would be very useful after concussion, for example, when you might have perfect vision but feel dazed, meaning your perception could be affected. This test, using symmetrical patterns, will measure perception accurately so that any improvement or deterioration can be monitored. Patterns of dots will be flashed up on the screen, and you have to instantly say if you think there's any symmetry. And because the colours used are the same brightness, your eye is not drawn to particular patches, so you're left to recognise symmetry by judging the whole group. Right, let's have a go at a few of these sets of dots, and I and you will just say immediately after a set appears whether we think there's symmetry. Yes. Good, I got that right. No. Well, I've got 2 right. See how you get on. If you got more than half right, your perception is well above average. And it's quite surprising how quickly you can work out if something is similar.
The dream of a fully automated workshop where the robots and androids have taken over is something that many people fear to wake up to in the future. Mind you, they're not really as clever as that yet. This one, for instance, look at him. He's as blind as a bat. Seems almost cruel, doesn't it? Off you go. You'll be all right now. No. A robot that can't see is of limited use around the factory floor. Of course, you can give them sensors so that they can feel. But if a robot can't see, it can never have enough information to find things on the production line. For instance, it can't tell if something on that production line has moved. And it certainly won't recognize its target. No. So long as they remain blind, then the day of the fully automated factory will remain a mere illusion. But the job of putting in car windscreens on the assembly line is one that's always been done by hand. It's a very repeatable process requiring great precision, and the whole business of priming, sealing and fitting the screen manually is not always as accurate or as reliable as it should be. But it's just the sort of job a robot could do if it could see. So a brand new breed of robots had to be designed. Well, these robots can see in a primitive sort of way using a very simple camera. A broad beam of light is shone down here onto the pillar that surrounds the windscreen. And of course, all that light is reflected back. But because the camera is hidden down a very narrow slit, only the light that is reflected back at the right angle reaches the light-sensitive diodes. And it's that part of the reflected light that happens to come off the flange where the screen must be placed. So, using that, the robot is provided with an image of that flange. It's this peak here. Now, when the screen is brought near it, it interferes with that image, giving a clear picture of the relationship between the screen and the flange. And by placing 4 cameras around the windscreen, the robot can examine each one in turn, and by cross-checking the information, identify exactly where the screen is in relation to the car body. So the robot positions the screen just in front of the car, it has a good look, and then makes any adjustments using small motors, moving it up, down or sideways until it's in exactly the right place. And with robots being involved from the start in preparing the screens with all the kinds of adhesive they need, as well as lowering them down to the cars below, the whole process becomes totally automated. Well, if robots are doing more and more around the production line, at least they'll have to take a back seat when it comes to the driving.
Stand clear. Transporter 1 departing. Stand clear.
Go get him, Peter. Now, did you know we spent £100 million this Christmas helping our friends create the illusion that they don't smell like plain old Judith, Peter or Maggie, but instead like Pierre Cardin and Yves Saint Laurent. But the real masters of olfactory illusion aren't the famous names, but the perfumers who make the smells that go into lavatory cleaner, shampoo, washing powder, the products for the mundane side of our life. I mean, you can't put 20 quid's worth of exotic spices into a 29p bar of soap. But a bit of exotic chemistry will turn turpentine or North Sea oil into roses, lemon, sandalwood, anything you want. And they're getting better and better at it. This liquid is a mixture of 17 chemicals, and with names like 2,3,5-trimethylpyrazine and ethyl maltol, I wasn't the least bit surprised to learn that some of them come from coal tar. But I was very surprised to find that together they smell just like, well, don't take my word for it.
Chocolate or cocoa?
Oh dear. It's chocolatey almost.
I think it smells like chocolate.
Dead right, and pretty good when you consider that none of the chemicals in here have ever been near a cocoa bean. That test doesn't always work, though. Have a look at one lady's response to that same chocolate smell.
I think it's a nail varnish.
Well, it's not nail varnish. Think instead of...
Cleanser, a cleanser.
Not really. And that's apparently one of the standard tricks our noses play on us. We don't smell the same things in the same way. And no one can explain why it happens. In fact, no one really knows how the sense of smell works, apart from the fact that it has something to do with a smelly chemical travelling up your nose and landing on these things, the smell receptors. You've got about 10 million of them up your nose, and they're easily conned. By creating chemicals that stimulate the right receptors in the right way, smell researchers can make a person think he's smelling almost anything. But what this smell chemist would really like to do is to work a double con, to find chemicals that stop certain receptors from working and prevent us from smelling nasty things like the cat litter or the rubbish bin. Mind you, cat litter smells positively heavenly beside this stuff. It's a mixture called PU5. It's quite disgusting, and what we wanted to discover was whether the chemist could produce an antidote that would block the smell receptors and stop you from smelling the PU5. They said they could, and the poor old public tried it out. First, the ghastly PU5.
Oh, it's horrible.
Now a good dose of the anti-smell.
It's weaker.
It is disappearing as you go on.
No, it's still horrible.
You're a brave man to go in so close.
No, it's not. No, it's gone now. You're either getting rid of the smell, Kieran.
Does it take time to work?
The conclusion we were forced to draw was that it sort of works for some people, which, say the developers, is what they find. Unfortunately for them, fooling the nose isn't easy, because if we don't all smell the same way, how can we be expected not to smell the same things? Well, nevertheless, it'll soon be turning up in cat litter and deodorizers. So if your world starts smelling a little less nasty, either the cats run off or it works.
Spots before the eyes. The most familiar illusion, television. You see a moving picture of me, but in reality, I'm just thousands of tiny, flashing, coloured spots. Come very close to the screen and see for yourself. You don't even need a magnifying glass to see them. My face is actually built up of hundreds of those dots arranged across and up and down the screen. And if you're close, you'll realise that there's not much detail here at all. It's just that when you stand back, the dots blend together to make a sharp picture. For a living room-sized screen, it's a good enough illusion. But try blowing that up to a couple of meters across to give you that, that big cinema feeling, and that sharp picture very soon begins to look a bit fuzzy. You'd immediately see all those dots again, even from back there in your armchair. Well, there's about to be a revolution in television. It's a new system that produces much higher definition pictures that can be blown up to fill a cinema screen without shattering the illusion. To see how it works, we need to look again at a conventional television. This picture of a surrealist Dali egg is actually made up of 625 lines. And it's that number of lines that actually determines the detail that you see. So one way of going to work on this egg to improve the detail would be to build up the picture over, say, twice as many lines. And you'd get a much bigger egg and not lose any of the detail. Okay, so 4 tellies is hardly practical. The real solution has involved designing a completely new television system, which needs new high-definition cameras as well as high-definition video recorders, all working not on 625 lines, but on 1,125 lines. We'll see the big screen in a moment, but first let's try and persuade you how effective this system really is on a domestic-sized high-definition picture. Well, I must say, it looks amazingly sharp to me, but how am I going to convince you watching at home on your ordinary sets? Well, we've got a high-definition camera here looking at a piece of machinery. Anyone in the know will, of course, recognize it as a BBC camera that went out of date only last year, but it's intricate enough to be difficult to look at in detail. The camera here is giving us a picture on this high-definition set over here, and alongside is a conventional camera looking at the same piece of machinery, and the picture from that is appearing on this ordinary television set. Now, the real test is to look closely at both those two screens, as we did before. First of all, at the conventional one. As we go in close, already you can see the lines that make up the picture. But now looking at the high-definition picture, there are no lines that are visible at all. Put the two together, and you can see with the high definition on the right, it still retains more detail, even though we're now looking at a section of the screen only a couple of centimeters across. That amount of detail will certainly bear being projected onto a large screen. And with a 2-meter screen, you have the world's first high-definition television cinema. And it's just as good quality as cinema film. But the advantage is that because it's a television picture, it won't scratch or fade, but more important than that, it can be transmitted by radio and beamed from satellites. If television is an illusion today, it's going to be an even bigger illusion tomorrow.
Command, marks on.
The cinema is still the most spectacular purveyor of visual trickery. These scenes were made by combining a lot of individual components on one piece of film. It's a technique which relies on a computer to precisely control the movements of the camera, which must be repeatable with 100% accuracy, so that all the separate elements of one shot fit together. This satellite will be part of a shot for a feature film called 2084, a deceptively simple shot of a satellite orbiting a planet that actually took 3 days to shoot. It was done like this. First, the satellite is shot on its own using colour film. The camera moves slowly towards and under the model, making the satellite appear to be flying towards us and out of the picture. Putting the background planet on is a 2-stage process. First, the camera's loaded with black and white film, and the shot is repeated. Only this time the model is backlit to produce the silhouette, because what they're making is a matte or mask, which will exactly match the movement of the satellite on the colour film. Then the planet is added. For the planet's surface, they use actual NASA satellite pictures projected onto a curved screen. And this time the camera's loaded with 2 strips of film. The undeveloped colour film of the satellite, and in front of it the black and white mask. The mask exactly covers the satellite to stop the planet from being superimposed over it.
So we're ready to shoot.
Again, the camera's driven through exactly the same movements as before, while at the same time the projectors are slowly turned by the computer to give the planet an appearance of rotation. In this print of the finished film, the final shot may only make a brief appearance, but without the sophistication of this computer control system, the satellite would look a lot more like the 3-foot model it actually is.
I don't know. One minute you're munching mince pies, the next minute you're hard at work in the office. Doesn't Christmas just feel like an illusion? And what an office to come back to. I mean, it's all right for him, but with one tiny murky little window miles over there, it's like working in a cellar on this side. I mean, wouldn't you have thought that with all the technology available to it, tomorrow's world couldn't have come up with the illusion of a sun over my desk?
Yeah, Maggie, this might help.
Say.
Sorry it's a bit late for Christmas.
Oh, brilliant.
Don't stay too late, will you? Oh, instructions.
Hey, part-timer. Now, this does look promising. It says, fix this in your window and the darkest corners of your room will appear bright and sunny. Sounds like a good idea. Let's try it out. Now, gosh, this is heavy. The wrapping paper off. Hey, tell you what. And we'll do a proper test. Turn off the light so we can compare it to his side of the office. And here we go. Now, I don't like to put a dampener on it, but I don't think this is going to make a great deal of difference. And of course, I can't see any difference, can I? So, could you possibly do me a favour? Can you just have a look over there? And I'll just lower this down, right? So that's the murky window, right? One murky window, one magic window. Murky window, magic window. So what do you think? You reckon it's better? I'll come and have a look. Just let me fix this up here. Hey, that's all right, isn't it? Oh, would you look at that? I've got a rainbow over my head. That's going to brighten things up a bit. Well, since it does work, I'd better let you in the secret, hadn't I? This is the material which the magic window is made from. It's actually a hologram, a microscopic pattern of lines. But when light shines through this one, it doesn't form a picture. It splits the light in two. I'll just show you. I have one light, one card, and one hologram. Now, what happens is that half the light shines straight through to here, just as it would through an ordinary window, whilst the other half is bent up to here. There, you can see it. Now, it's bent up by the pattern of lines, and it spreads out to form the colours of a rainbow. So all you have to do is to arrange it so that this beam here hits the ceiling in the darkest part of your room. Then the light will get scattered down and all the different colours will reassemble to make white light. It's simple really, isn't it? And because of the way the hologram is made, it will throw light to the same part of the room even as the sun moves around during the day. Well, it's made from a new kind of material which for the very first time allows you to make this kind of hologram easily and in large sheets. Or, at any rate, it will do soon. Because so far, this is the largest piece they've got. So we'll have to make do with a very small office.
Maggie!
Oh, hang on a minute! Just a...
Maggie, where are you?
You won't listen, will you? I mean, fancy walking into a programme about illusions. Well, look, while you're in there, what do you think of the window?
Oh, magic.
Wonderful.
Good start.
Anyway, provided they all grow up, we'll be back with you on the 10th of January. See you then.
Happy New Year.
Good night.